Just remember, the stuff presented by this creepy bear is from the Evolution 101 website, written by the Understanding Evolution team. Commentary by Rent-A-Friend2000. That's me.
Understanding phylogenies. Understanding a phylogeny is a lot like reading a family tree. The root of the tree represents the ancestral lineage, and the tips of the branches represent the descendants of that ancestor. As you move from the root to the tips, you are moving forward in time.
Well, without a TARDIS? I don't like the sound of that.
When a lineage splits, speciation, it is represented as branching on a phylogeny. When a speciation event occurs, a single ancestral lineage gives rise to two or more daughter lineages. Phylogenies trace patterns of shared ancestry between lineages. Each lineage has a part of its history that is unique to it alone and parts that are shared with other lineages. Similarly, each lineage has ancestors that are unique to that lineage and ancestors that are shared.
Our friends over at Berkeley are like children exploring a forest. They can see that branches meet at limbs and limbs meet at the trunk. So they say, "Golly, maybe all these tree trunks are just branches on an even bigger tree, way underground. Maybe this whole forest is only one big tree." It's creative, but if you start digging, you'll find a significant lack of evidence for their theory. Grab your shovels, kids. We're going to take a look into the roots of the problem. Once again, none of this is based on observable data or events, except at the level where all of the points on the chart are dogs, or where all of the points on the chart are cabbages. When you back out far enough to find where dogs blend with cats and with turtles and with cabbage, there's nothing which actually exists to fill in the chart. This is the result of beginning with an assumption of the evolutionary theory, then putting different species into a faux animation sequence. Don't get me wrong, you bring in John Lasseter and add some catchy musical numbers, and this animation sequence can be every bit as good as Oliver and Company. But a fictional story, animated for kids, is still fictional. And to be honest, I didn't really like Oliver and Company. But I digress. What they failed to show above is how many of those lines should be dotted to indicate no known species exists here, living or in the fossil record. The ape-to-human family tree would be almost entirely dotted lines, and where it isn't would merely be connecting humans with humans, or apes with apes, which is not something creationists disagree with. We're all just fine with the idea of apes giving birth to apes and humans giving birth to humans. So where there is actually some evidence to look at, we tend to agree with the Understanding Evolution team. What we disagree with is all of the places where they draw a line from, for example, cabbages to wolves, when the existence of the cabbage wolf is, as of yet, without hard evidence.
Building the tree. Like family trees, phylogenetic trees represent patterns of ancestry.
Remember above where they admitted that the ancestry was hypothetical guesswork? I just wanted to remind you, as it seems they have already forgotten.
However, while families have the opportunity to record their own history as it happens, evolutionary lineages do not. Species in nature do not come with pieces of paper showing their family histories.
Shocking as this will be to people like Richard Dawkins, we creationists already knew this before Berkeley put it on the internet.
Instead, biologists must reconstruct those histories by collecting and analyzing evidence, which they use to form a hypothesis about how the organisms are related, a phylogeny.
Let me translate with my handy Darwin to English dictionary. We don't see things evolve, we can't observe evolution, making it no longer observational science, so we invent it as we go along. Charts like this are speculative guesswork based on our faith. I'm paraphrasing, but nothing I am saying contradicts what they are saying. I'm literally just clarifying.
To build a phylogenetic tree such as the one above, biologists collect data about the characters of each organism they are interested in. Characters are heritable traits that can be compared across organisms, such as physical characteristics, morphology, genetic sequences, and behavioral traits.
I did this once, and made a chart showing that all of life on Earth had evolved from rabbits. To be honest, mine made a lot more sense than some of these. For instance, mine explained the origin of the platypus. It involved a migrating space duck. I'll publish that someday.
In order to construct the vertebrate phylogeny, we begin by examining representatives of each lineage to learn about their basic morphology, whether or not the lineage has vertebrae, a bony skeleton, 4 limbs, an amniotic egg, etc.
Or if they have fur, cute noses, long ears, a tendency to nap all day, eat hay, and poop on the floor. Bunny traits, which I think you will find a lot of animals share.
Using shared derived characters. Our goal is to find evidence that will help us group organisms into less and less inclusive clades. Specifically, we are interested in shared derived characters. A shared character is one that 2 lineages have in common, and a derived character is one that evolved in the lineage leading up to a clade and that sets members of that clade apart from other individuals.
For instance, cabbage are green, and frogs are green, so we can group frogs with cabbages. The platypus is still on an island somewhere between beaver and duck with question marks around it.
Shared derived characters can be used to group organisms into clades. For example, amphibians, turtles, lizards, snakes, crocodiles, birds and mammals all have, or historically had, 4 limbs. If you look at a modern snake you might not see obvious limbs, But fossils show that ancient snakes did have limbs, and some modern snakes actually do retain rudimentary limbs. Four limbs is a shared derived character inherited from a common ancestor that helps set apart this particular clade of vertebrates.
I just have to ask, if they find a fossil skeleton of an animal with 4 limbs, why do they think it was a snake? Is it just me? Who looks at what is essentially a gecko or a salamander and says, "This lizard-like skeleton with 4 legs? Snake! Yep, 4-legged snake!" Yeah, who is that guy, and what university gave him tenure? And it is simply false that snakes have legs. They have a bone structure in the back half of the snake, which, with the right imagination, is located where hind legs would be if snakes had legs. That bone is used to anchor muscles which are necessary to make baby snakes. So no, snakes do not have legs. And neither do whales. Who's saying that whales have legs? Oh, you just wait. They'll get there.
However, the presence of 4 limbs is not useful for determining relationships within the clade in green above, since all lineages in the clade have that character. To determine the relationships in that clade, we would need to examine other characters that vary across the lineages in the clade.
Can I just point out that we are still talking about creatively inventing these charts based on not observing anything evolve into anything else? Yeah, it would be easy to forget that amidst all of this chart business. For instance, that all land-dwelling animals evolved from the same 4-legged ancestor is merely assumed. No evidence is provided for it, and I seriously doubt they would even claim that any exists. As you will see later, the story the fossils tell is barely a word for every 1,000-page volume of evolutionary story. As part of the evolutionary story, these prior ancestors are assumed and unquestioned. Assumed and unquestioned are big around these parts. They are to evolution what iPhones and Twitter are to tweens. Join me next time for Part 5.